This is David Prosper, host of The Leadership Revolution. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast from Public House Media.
Strike three, you're out.
Welcome back to Caught Listening, the baseball show that goes beyond the game. It's a little bit of a bittersweet episode here, dropping on March 26th, which was supposed to be opening day 2020, but unfortunately, of course, with COVID-19 and the pandemic that has broken out, for the safety of everybody, basically sports and life as we know it has been kind of put on hold, but that doesn't mean that we can't still enjoy baseball and enjoy it in some of the best ways possible, with movies and Hollywood effects and taking different things completely out of context and creating crazy, crazy scenarios where 13-year-olds inherit the Minnesota Twins, 12-year-olds who destroy their arm become super pitchers, and all that other wonderful fun stuff. And to help us talk about it all is Matt Martell, Sports Illustrated writer and contributor. And Matt worked with another writer and Emma Bocciolieri, 13 essential baseball movies and books to get your Major League Baseball fix. We're going to talk books on a later date, but I want to talk today about movies. And Matt, we appreciate the time. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for putting that article out there with Emma.
Thanks for having me on. It's going to be fun.
So let's just kind of, right off the bat, before we get into favorites and everything else, in your mind, what makes a great baseball movie?
So I guess the what makes a great baseball movie is kind of what makes great baseball. It's either A, seeing something you've never seen before, mm-hmm. or seeing something that stretches the imagination of what's possible. As you were talking about, a 13-year-old somehow inheriting the Minnesota Twins and running the organization, Little Big League. That's just a fun premise, a thing that we never thought would be possible. It's not really in our comprehension that, this could ever happen. And, it's not going to ever happen. But that's kind of what makes it fun, that we can stretch the boundaries of what is real and what's not through baseball. Henry Rowan-Gardner throwing out his arm and then all of a sudden, becoming this ace pitcher with the Chicago Cubs. It's brilliantly stupid, if that makes sense. Like that's the one spectrum of what makes a great baseball movie. Look at The Natural for another example.
Yeah.
Some sort of you bring in the mysticism of it all. That this is not really realistic, but it's like an idealized version of baseball. Field of Dreams, another example of that. So that's one end of the spectrum, and then the other one is of good baseball movies is taking real events and making them into a movie. Well, a fictionalized version, yes. An idealized version, yes. But something that is based on a real story and somehow cuts to the core of what makes us baseball fans. Mm-hmm. Whether it's a league of their own and everybody rallying behind the All-American Girls Baseball League during during wartime. Whether it's the girls on that, the women on that team sort of proving to the boys around them that they can play baseball too. Sort of that overcoming nature of a baseball story is also in there. Whether you want to do Bull Durham and, you get the nitty-gritty details of what it's like to be a minor league baseball player going around North Carolina on buses. I mean, just that aspect of it too. Moneyball, for all of its faults as far as not really being as accurate as what happened with the A's that season. How, yes, they were underdogs financially, but they had a really good team. Mm-hmm. The movie doesn't matter in the accuracy of it. It's a great story of, a man who is kind of trying to do something completely different in a game that is built with tradition. So, I mean, those are the two categories, I guess, of baseball movies, mysticism and realism.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, I look back at some of my favorite movies and they kind of fall into that, and yet some of the movies that many people consider great, the reasons I don't like them are for reasons you just kind of described. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love Moneyball. I love the idea behind it. I think Brad Pitt is amazing in it. I think the girl who plays his daughter is even better in it. But when you watch that movie, and I went and watched it when it came out in theaters, I was working in collegiate athletics, and I went and watched it with our entire coaching staff for the baseball team, and all of us at the very end looked at each other and went, well, they didn't talk about the fact that they had Mulder and Hudson and, all these other guys that made them great, made them a very, very good team. So it's interesting that you bring that up, because in the same breath, people like me, sometimes we look for accuracies, and then there's a movie that just is completely out. There's no way this happens. No way a farmer in Iowa who's never farmed before is gonna plow over his cornfield because he hears a voice and try to travel cross country while his wife is facing bankruptcy at home. And yet Field of Dreams is still one of the most quintessential, not just baseball movies, but American movies of all time.
Right. And I think that's the point. If you're looking at what the two categories, like I said, mysticism and realism. With the mysticism category, you can completely suspend your sort of belief about what is possible, what people would normally do, what makes sense. When it's a straight biopic or presented that way, as Moneyball is, and you ignore Mulder and Zito and the great pitching staff, Tim Hudson, and you ignore that they had Miguel Tejada playing shortstop, and Eric Chavez at third base. I mean, when you ignore that aspect of it, it's a little bit harder to suspend belief because it's presented as a straight, realistic depiction of what happened. At the same time, and this is where I appreciate and really enjoy Moneyball as a straight, dramatic movie. I think the central sort of premise of the movie still applies and is still resonates. It's somebody trying to buck a trend of something that's been steadfast in the way the structure has been set up for years, and he's trying to do something different to maximize the potential of this team, because at the same time he had more constraints over constructing his roster because of the financial element of it. So yes, at the same time, I was kind of befuddled that they decided to just omit some of the incredible talents that they had during, those teams, those early aughts A's teams were very talented. I think both can be true, that you need to, get the most out of the guys that you add because you're limited financially, and you can still have some really darn good players also on your team. So I would have liked them to go into that, but overall, I still really do enjoy the movie regardless.
It's separating that entertainment from facts, which is hilarious for me to say that, because I'm the pot calling the kettle black when I look at all these Comic-Con people who get mad that the Avengers series doesn't follow the comic books to a T or something like that. So I can't exactly be upset about certain things. You just got to shut up and enjoy the film for what it actually is. Right. We're talking with Matt Martell.
Like whether it's based
Yeah. We're talking with Matt Martell, Sports Illustrated, who worked on a piece, 13 Essential Baseball Movies and Books to Get Your Major League Baseball Fix. I want to talk about some of the movies that you have listed on here, because there are some that people know, League of Their Own, Field of Dreams, Bull Durham, and Moneyball. And then there's one that I'm so happy you put it on here, has a little bit of a special bit of my heart, because I worked for the Quad Cities River Bandits, who at one point were the swing of Quad Cities, which is the team that is featured in this movie. It's called Sugar. Why did you put Sugar on this list?
Well, Emma and I both put Sugar on the list because neither of us had seen it, and we had heard so many unbelievable things about it that we were like, well, if there's a time to watch this lesser-known baseball movie that every baseball writer who has seen it raves about, we should see it. Now, actually, I have not seen it yet, so maybe I'm not completely taking my advice on it, but at the same time, that's the reason why we put it on there, because both of us had not seen it, and both of us wanted to see it while we were waiting for baseball to come. So maybe that'll be what I do on opening day if I don't really have baseball to watch.
I got to tell you, it's an incredible movie, because it's not just about a kid trying to make it in baseball. It's about It's about a kid from the Dominican who's trying to make it as a human being in the United States, and not just the United States, but he goes to the middle of nowhere, Iowa, and it's right there on the Mississippi River, and it's toiling through. It's as if you took the seriousness of, I'm trying to think, and I don't want to speak too hyperbolic here, but the seriousness of 42 with the goofiness and the idea of minor league baseball that you see in Bull Durham. And it's trying to blend that. And it's such a powerful, powerful movie.
Right. It's the fish out of water story with serious implications.
100%. So if you guys do get a chance, Sugar would be probably the one that I tell most people, again, because you're right. Most baseball writers and most baseball, people who cover the sport, if they tell you to see one movie that you haven't, it's Sugar. So I definitely, for anybody listening, I would definitely, if anybody listening, to go and watch that movie. There's one on here too that is one that I don't know how many people have seen because of where it came out. Moneyball, Bull Durham, Field of Dreams, A League of Their Own, Sugar, they're all, you can find them, they were at one point on VHS or DVD or whatever it is.
Right.
But 61 was an HBO film. And I remember when it came out, and I remember watching pieces of it. And first off, I love Barry Pepper as an actor in general, and I think he's tremendous as Roger Maris. And Billy Crystal's a great storyteller. But 61 is one of those ones that, I think, to me, it just blends everything that you're looking for from a movie standpoint and from a factual standpoint. It's one of those ones that toes that line perfectly.
Right, exactly. And I think I wrote in the piece that for a couple of years when I was in middle school and obsessed with Mickey Mantle, this was what I would tell people was my favorite movie when, first day of school when they'd ask you as icebreakers what your favorite movie was, that's what I would say. And it really is just a great movie about what it was like for Maris being in the shadow of Mantle, even though he had won the MVP the year before after coming over from the Kansas City A's, after he had really jolted that lineup even more than it already had been through the 50s, regardless of what he was doing on the field. He was never going to be Mickey Mantle. And the fact that he was never going to be Mickey Mantle and he was challenging Babe Ruth's record, the ultimate, mythical Yankee, he was never going to live up to it. And I think that story at the same time resonates with anybody trying to live up to this image that everybody wants you to be. And even as you continue to exceed expectations of what is possible, you're never going to be good enough. I think that psychological challenge is what resonates with me now, even if it didn't resonate with me when I first saw the movie.
Yeah, and it's also interesting, too, because you have so many of the old-timer Yankee fans who tell you, and if you look back at newspaper articles, these are supposed to be two guys who hated each other, and two guys who just, their relationship was awful, and you talk about Maris living in the shadow of Mickey, and there were even reports that Maris felt the Yankees were favoring Mickey and wanted him to break Babe's record instead of Roger and all of this stuff. But to see how it's kind of played out within the film is certainly an interesting dichotomy between those two.
Right, because they actually didn't hate each other. And I think that was the really interesting part. It was they were framed as competitors going at this home run record. One is the golden boy of New York, the one whose faults were never printed in the newspaper, the one whose achievements were hyped up on the sort of pedestal of Mantle and Garrigan, coming after DiMaggio. But they were actually not enemies. They got along, they played well together, and it was just the sort of narrative of hyping everybody up and hyping the Mantle versus Maris home run race that made it seem like they did not get along, and then the pressures of trying to live up to this sort of home run race, to live up to Babe Ruth and to, whether you can do this or not, whether you should do this or not, whether, this outsider should be the one to break this natural Yankee record, or whether it should be, the one who's come up through our farm system, the one who's played here and, become a franchise icon.
This is a topic for a completely different show, but this is almost the first moment in American sports where the media played such a huge role in the perception of athletes. But that's again, completely different topic.
No, but actually this is an interesting point overall, and I think that if we do have this book discussion, there is one or two elements I think earlier when we talked about DiMaggio, and I put the biography of him on the list, and like I said, different discussion, but maybe it's a little preview of how much the image of an athlete can be hyped up based on the media landscape of the time. Definitely
interesting to discuss, and I'm looking forward to that. You and I will definitely have that conversation.
Yeah.
Talking with Matt Martell, again, Sports Illustrated, he and Emma Baccellieri put together 13 essential baseball movies and books to get your MLB fix. I'm glad you put it on here because there were people who were asking us questions about whether or not documentaries can be considered baseball movies. And not only did you put a documentary on here, but you put a 10-part docuseries on here. And what is the most, in my opinion, the best possible analog of baseball history in the United States, and that is, of course, Ken Burns' Baseball, which is always on Major League Baseball Network throughout the offseason. Why did you put that on here?
Because it's almost ingrained in my baseball watching experience. The amount of times I have it on in the background while I'm either working, writing something, reading something, or just hanging out. I mean, just in the off season, that's what I put on when they go from MLB Tonight into the 9:00 hour of Ken Burns' weekly baseball, whichever episode they have on in that order. So I've probably heard the whole thing far more times than I've watched the whole thing, even though I have watched the whole thing, just because it's background noise, it's on, and it's soothing to hear Buck O'Neil talk about baseball. It's soothing to listen and watch the old clips. It's just it's romantic. It's also very it doesn't pull its punches when it needs to, highlight something that needed to be talked about, something that was not great about baseball. It just is a very good document of the game, even if some of the things that it talks about old baseball or different scandals or different things, or I guess things that happened in the past have been proven to not always be as factually correct over time.
No,
so, the way they cover the Black Sox scandal, things like that, different things that they talk about then was correct at the time or was perceived to be true at the time and has been proved somewhat, up in the air now, but at the same time, it's still a living, breathing document of how people have perceived baseball over time, and most of it is very, very authentic.
100%. So that kind of leads me into this one. Talking about a documentary series, myself personally this week, one of the things I spent doing to get my baseball fix was I started watching every baseball-themed 30 for 30 on ESPN and looking at other documentaries. Is there a different documentary about baseball or that you have seen that maybe you would want to put on that list as well?
So I really liked some of the MLB Network special documentaries that I've seen recently. Whether it's the Dave Parker one, I really liked.
Yeah.
I liked the Seattle Mariners one. Just the way that they capture specific moments with these, hour-long baseball documentaries, I really like. I like the Dennis Eckersley one. So there are just, different people that they feature for these stories. I didn't really know all that. I didn't know that much about, like I said, Dave Parker. But that was a really interesting look at him both then and now that I really liked. And if we're talking about recommending things, these are the stuff that they are airing on MLB Network all the time right now because there is no baseball on. So those are pretty easy to find, and they're worth, the hour that you commit to watching them.
I can tell you right now, there are two that I just love, and I found them randomly. I don't remember. I was flying out to California for a wedding in October, and I was looking for stuff to download on Netflix, and I found two that I just absolutely loved. Screwball, which literally came out in 2019,
yes.
which is phenomenal. It's a hilarious documentary about Tony Bosch, Alex Rodriguez, and the whole doping scandal, which is hilarious because it's done basically with child actors, which is some of the funniest stuff I've ever seen, but it's amazing. And then the other one that is really interesting, and for those who've never been a part of independent baseball or don't know how this all kind of really got started, The Battered Bastards of Baseball is tremendous, and it's about the Portland Mavericks, the first ever independent league team in 1973 that was owned and operated by Bing Russell, the dad of Kurt Russell, and just everything that they did there between having the first female general manager in baseball history to this idea that they were going to challenge for a AAA title in the minor leagues, even though they were not affiliated. Those are two. It just really blows your mind as to what independent baseball, and for those who have been a part of it, how independent baseball really kind of got its start.
Yeah, no. So those are both ones I would also recommend. I recently watched Screwball. Really enjoyed it. You're right. The child actors part of it is just actually works really well, and I think it's. Yes, and it's a testament to the idea that what everybody was doing was childish. I mean, it's just it's amazing how all of that fallout happened, and I think it works really well.
No, it's pretty interesting and pretty fun there. So, of course, when we talk about movies nowadays, there's over the last decade there have been three really kind of big ones that have come out. We talked about Moneyball already, but one of the ones, the other two that really pop into my mind are what we talked about at the start of the show, which was the mysticism, and then one of them being the factual side of things. Trouble with the Curve and 42. When you look at the two of them, given the star power in each one, of course, Trouble with the Curve, Justin Timberlake, Amy Adams, Clint Eastwood, John Goodman, the list goes on. And then 42, Chadwick Boseman, who is about to become Black Panther and really go for it, Harrison Ford, and a couple of others. When you look at the newer versions of baseball movies, obviously the cinematography is better from a movie standpoint, but from a baseball standpoint, how do you think we've evolved baseball movies over the last, 2-3 decades?
I find it interesting because I don't really like Trouble with the Curve. I think it's messy. It's not completely. I guess it's hard to explain, but I don't like the kid that they're trying to draft. I don't think it really portrays that side of baseball great. And I think it's much more about obviously the Amy Adams, Clint Eastwood relationship. But I think that they were too laxed on the baseball part, that it just doesn't seem authentic. And I think it's supposed to. So it just, that one didn't really, it looked like it was relying too much on its star power to tell a story that needed enhancing on the story part.
Okay.
As far as 42 goes, I think that, as you were talking about how it's evolved over time, I really enjoyed the way that it was crafted in the dynamic nature of the camera and of the colors and of it's vibrant, it's exciting. And I think that that's one of the best ways to tell a baseball story that isn't always told that way. I mean, there aren't too many baseball movies that are loud and exciting through the entire palette of the screen that I think 42 does exceptionally well.
So before we get into a segment we play here every week, I want to get your personal favorite movie, baseball movie of all time. The one that you're going to. You've only got one movie to watch.
Yeah.
Which one are you going with? A League of Their Own. Okay.
And yes. Yeah. The best way I think to describe A League of Their Own is my brother Josh, who does not care about baseball at all. He's indifferent to the sport. Mm-hmm. That's his favorite movie.
Okay.
So what it does from a comedic standpoint, from a drama standpoint, from a baseball standpoint, from everything, from a historical standpoint. It touches all of the different elements that I enjoy and that most movie goers enjoy, even if they are not particularly fans of baseball.
No, you're not wrong there. So, and the other, like, the part of it too that I just love is, again, I mean, just seeing how it blends part of what was true into the mysticism of Hollywood, which is great.
Right.
And you bring up an interesting point too, the comedic side of things. And most people, when you ask them their favorite baseball movie, they generally go to Bull Durham or Major League because of the comedic effect of it. Is there another sport that could really have the same comedy level that baseball does when it comes to movies?
I don't know. That's a good question. Just because most of the sports movies that I gravitate to are baseball movies.
Mm-hmm.
Baseball or boxing movies, and a lot of the boxing movies are ultra serious.
Yeah.
So I like them for different reasons. I'm trying to think good sport comedies that have worked, and
I just can't imagine us having this conversation from basketball and trying to choose between He Got Game and Semi-Pro. I can't see us trying to have that conversation.
Right. Right. It's a clear number one.
Right.
Of those two. Because the comedy doesn't work as well or as seamlessly back and forth between drama and comedy, like it does in Bull Durham and A League of Their Own. Major League is a little bit separate as far as it is a pure comedy, but at the same time, it works really, really well. And I don't think you have the seamless transition back and forth of almost like a dramedy in other sports movies like you do in baseball. And if listeners are hearing this and they have great examples of dramedy sports movies that are not baseball, please tweet at me.
Yeah.
By Matt Martell.
By all means, let us know.
Because I'm very curious to hear it out and see what I'm missing, because I'm sure I am missing a couple.
The best example I can give is The Replacements. That's the only real one that I can think of. Yep. And that's about it. But I can't, again, you're talking about Brian's song versus, the one with the remake Adam Sandler did, where he's in
The Longest Yard.
Yeah, The Longest Yard. Yes, yeah. So it's there are no brainers. So it's interesting in that sense, the way that baseball, but that's also kind of the sport. Like, you can easily have the goofiest looking error of all time, and then 2 innings later, that same guy is in position to hit a walk-off home run. That's the sport.
Look at David Freese in Game 6 of the 2011 World Series. He dropped a pop-up early on in the game, and it looked rather silly. And then he hits the triple over Nelson Cruz's head and right, and then wins the game later. You're absolutely right. The seamless blend of comedy and drama and everything. You're absolutely right.
That's a perfect example there too of it happening in real life. We're talking with Matt Martell, Sports Illustrated writer here, talking baseball movies. Matt, every week we let the listeners send us in some questions on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, by searching Caught Listening, Public House Media, or by emailing the show, caughtlisteningphm@gmail.com. And we play a game called Pepper. They basically send us their questions, and you and I give our quick-hitting responses. Sound good?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, first one here is from Miles. He's asking, rank the Kevin Costner trilogy movies from best to worst, the Kevin Costner baseball one. So for Love of the Game, Bull Durham, and Field of Dreams, in order. Which one? What do you have there in your order for those three?
All right, well, I'm going 3-1, just because you always count down when you're doing rankings.
Yep.
Number 3, for Love of the Game, really is a good movie, just not on par with the other two. Number 2, Field of Dreams. I can't put it number 1 when they have Shoeless Joe Jackson batting right-handed. Number 1 is Bull Durham, because it's just one of the best baseball movies of all time.
I'm going to flop 3 and 2, simply because, don't get me wrong, I love Field of Dreams, and when I was living in Iowa and I got to go to the site, it was actually an emotional experience for me.
Yes,
it was incredible.
I was there too. Yep.
And you have to go do that, but I've said this before on this show, growing up as a Red Sox fan, whenever the Yankees get a perfect game thrown against them in their own stadium, it's never a bad thing for a movie. Not to mention, Vin Scully has a tremendous line at the end of that in the cathedral that is Yankee Stadium belongs to a chapel, is a line that only Vin Scully could possibly have. So,
absolutely. And John C. Reilly catching, very interesting role of casting that I appreciate every time.
J.K. Simmons is the manager for some reason. Who knows? It's just random. But no, so I'll go Field of Dreams 3 for love of the game 2, and then when you have arguably the most quotable movie of all time, especially in baseball, it's Bull Durham is number 1. So yeah, 100% Bull Durham is number 1 out of those 3. Okay, this one coming in from James. If you could make one baseball movie that is yet to be made, a true movie, what would it be about? So what's the one baseball topic that is yet to be turned into a movie that you would want to see turned into one?
A true story.
Yeah.
I would like to see a movie about DiMaggio, a biopic. I mean, I think you could take it right out of the Richard Bed Kramer biography, which I listed in the story for books. I think it'd be interesting casting, but they're already making biopics on Marilyn Monroe, so I think that you could find a DiMaggio the same way.
I don't know if there is one about this. I feel like there should be, and this was partially a league of their own, I guess, but I would love, men's professional baseball when Ted Williams, DiMaggio, Hank Greenberg, and all these guys are fighting in World War II. And how, like, the fight to keep it going.
The watered-down nature of baseball. That's interesting.
Yeah. Like a replacements version, a baseball version of the Replacements from World War II. Because, again, it wasn't what it was, so you still had, even though Ted Williams was able to come back and still be Ted Williams for years, and most of these guys were. So I think I'd love to see that. And obviously it'd be dramatized like hell, but...
but that's part of the fun.
Right.
I mean,
exactly.
A lot of those guys, the ones that didn't become stars after the war, like Stan Musial, for instance, did, but the guys that you've never heard of, you could, dramatize that like crazy because nobody's even heard of these guys. Yeah. Apologies to their family members.
Yeah, 100%. All right, last one here. Mike is asking, we talked about best movies, so it's only fitting that we have this one. Mike asking your least favorite baseball movie of all time.
Interesting. I think the was it The Scout with Albert Brooks? Just bad. I couldn't get through it. I think Mr. Baseball is just weird and not good.
That's always on MLB Network, though.
I know, and every time it's on, I change the channel. And the Babe Ruth story, is that the one with John Goodman, or The Babe with John Goodman?
Yeah, with John Goodman.
The Babe. Yep. I think that's just the worst of the myth making of Babe Ruth.
Yeah. Those are 3 good ones. The Scout, though, like you almost forget that Brendan Fraser did that, and then yet for some reason,
movie.
yeah, and then for some reason, on every single list of fictional baseball players, Steve Nebraska is always brought up for some reason. I don't understand why that is. For me,
I would not have remembered his name.
Well, I only remember because of all these crazy fictional. Whenever it comes up, it's like, oh yeah, Steve Nebraska is pitching to Jake Taylor. I go, no. First off, Billy Chappell is pitching to Jake Taylor, number 1. But there's just a whole crazy. Actually, Billy Chappell's pitching to Crash Davis. Let's just put that to bed right there.
Right.
But
Kevin Costner versus Kevin Costner.
Exactly. For me, it's and this is where I get a little bit snobby. And I don't like being that person, but I don't care how many people talk to me and enjoy The Natural. I don't care that Robert Redford is in it. The ending, and I'm going to spoil it for people who've never read the book, the ending is completely different and dramatized and turned Hollywood in the movie as opposed to the book. I would have so much more loved that movie if the ending was exactly how it is in the book, which is... in complete shame for what he's done in throwing the World Series, Roy Hobbs leaves in the middle of the night, never to be seen again, and they lose. Like that to me, I would have loved that for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe I'm a little bit of a masochist there, but or a pessimist there. But I loved the ending in the book so much more than I did the movie. And I read the book before I saw the movie, so that's mine. Maybe that's the reason why I hate it, because I read the book first.
I can understand that. If you love the book, they change the ending and it just is completely different. Either it lands really well, or it's completely ruined. So I get you.
The idea of the dramatization and him knocking the stadium lights out, like I don't know. It was just weird. Especially after reading the book and it's like, oh, like you weren't expecting that in the book. It was like Sixth Sense. You weren't expecting that ending. And then all of a sudden they just completely went and changed it for the pure dramatization and Hollywood status of it. But that's usually how these things work. Well, Matt, we've appreciated the time and the conversation. Definitely want to get together with you. We'll do this next week for books and talk, because I'm reading like 7 of them right now and they're all baseball related. So I'd love to get your thoughts on them. Not by next week. That definitely won't happen. But we can definitely at least talk about them and get to that. So, but for now, in the meantime, Matt, please let the folks know listening how they can follow you and all of the great work that you're doing.
All right. So most of the stuff I write, either I'll tweet out personally or I retweet SI's tweet to the story. So you can follow me on Twitter by Matt Martell. 2 L's at the end of Martell. And then my author page is on SI /Matt Martell. So SI.com/Matt Martell, I believe. So
awesome. The post again, the 13 essential baseball movies and books to get your MLB fix. Matt, we appreciate you helping us keep baseball going, even though we're not actually playing games. We appreciate it so much, and we'll talk with you very soon.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Take care.
All right, it's Matt Martell, SI.com contributor. Again, it's this is the beauty of baseball. I loved the comparison that he made, because there's no sport that can do this, that can create those type of dramedies, as he called them. So I'm sure you guys all have a lot of hot takes about baseball movies. Feel free to give them to us. Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Just search Caught Listening by Public House Media. You can email the show, caughtlisteningphm@gmail.com. Matt will be back next week, and we'll talk about baseball books, your favorite ones that you might want to read, ones that you might have questions about and really wonder about. So by all means, send us all of the questions and statements you might have about the great baseball movies and great baseball books of all time. Until then, I'm Christian Heimall. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, share us with your friends and family wherever you get your podcasts. And until next week, you've been caught listening.